Hi, my name is Fred Sandblom with the NX Product Marketing team. In this tips and tricks session, we will have a look at the assembly constraints, some of new exciting functionality, along with some great usability improvements that will make your workflow more streamlined and efficient while creating and handling your various assembly tasks. In this example, we will be looking at an electric gear motor, the one you see on the screen, while walking you through usability improvements as well as new functionality. We will be touching on creation of valid constraints only, improved behavior of show constraints of component, copy and paste of component or subassembly's original location, auto align and the possibility of utilizing drag and drop techniques. New here is that adding a constraint that cannot be resolved or conflicting constraint is no longer possible. This helps the user to stay out of potentially timely downstream and upstream issues. To demonstrate, we evoke the Align Assembly Constraint menu and attempt to align the just constraint crimp's cylindrical centerline with the middle crimp's cylindrical centerline on the other side. As the centerline of the two cylinders do not align, and considering the already added constraints, this becomes a conflicting constraint. The alert message in the lower right corner clearly states the issue to be a conflicting constraint. We also note that the OK and Apply is not available on the Align Assembly Constraint menu, as this is a conflicting constraint. Resetting the stationary object and instead selecting the center line of the cylindrical face of the crimp in the mirrored position provides a solvable solution, although the direction of the crimp is wrong. We flip the constraint, and as the constraint now is solvable, we now have access to apply an OK on the menu and can go ahead and create the constraint. Using the show constraint of components, we can now easily navigate the constraints of the component within an assembly. Hovering the component in the graphical window, right mouse button click and selecting the Show Constraints of Component displays all the constraints related to the selected component and hides all the rest of the constraints in the assembly. Sometimes it can be difficult to see the constraints of the selected components. Using the See Through All option helps dim out the noise and emphasize the constraints of interest. Repeating the same procedure but with a new component demonstrates that Show Constraints of Component will change the displayed constraints to the newly selected component. You can of course do the same by hovering a component in the Assembly Navigator and selecting the Show Constraints of Component, as well as from the ribbon bar where the Show Constraints of Components is also available. When copying a component or subassembly and pasting it back into its parent assembly, the pasted component is now positioned in its original location. To demonstrate, we here copy the subassembly representing the full gear motor and paste it back into the overall assembly. Note that there are two gear motor assemblies, but they are packed in the Assembly Navigator. The pasted gear motor assembly is still selected, and hence we can easily move it into a new position to our liking using Move Component. The Auto Align Assembly constraint allows for drag around components in the graphical window. The really exciting news here is that you can now drag and drop components based on face selection and matching face pairs that can snap onto each other and create an assembly constraint. Let's demonstrate how to position the free crimp in the graphical screen. We start by setting the selection filter to face. To compare with the traditional method used earlier, we delete the crimp that we positioned earlier. Now, with all the prerequisites set, we evoke the Auto Align Assembly constraint and hover the cylindrical face of the crimp. We press and hold the left mouse button and drag it into the matching cylindrical face of the pin of the terminal, where we release the left mouse button. Note in the Assembly Navigator that an Align constraint is created. We continue by hover the face and lock with the left mouse button. We drag it to the matching planar top face of the terminal slot and drop it. To fully position the crimp, we do the same with the cylindrical cable cover and match it to the corresponding crimp on the other side. As the position is wrong, we flip it to its final position. In today's tips and trick video, we have explored news around the assemblies and in regard to the user experience and handling improvements. We have had a look at the new behavior where conflicting constraints are not allowed to create, and that helps users save time as they avoid potential upstream or downstream issues. Navigating the constraints of an assembly and its components is essential, and the show and hide of constraints related to specific components is a valuable addition. Copying and pasting subassemblies or components now end up in its original position, helping to quickly relocate the pasted version to the appropriate position in relations to the original. The drag and drop of components and subassemblies while using the auto-align assembly constraint is a new, intuitive way of quickly positioning your components. This concludes this tips and tricks session, and I would like to humbly thank you for your time and attention.